Welcome to the Chatters Box. My name is Kyle McClellan. This is the official podcast of the St. Louis Cardinals, and I'm going to be the host. And today we're with Oli Marmol, our first episode here in the Chatters Box. Oli, thanks so much for being here.
Love it.
Do you like our set?
This is a beautiful set. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for the compliment. And if our ratings tank, you have a lot to do with this.
It's on you.
Yeah. So I want to start off with the early years. Like, where'd you grow up? How'd you start to gain your love of the game, your love of baseball? Take me back to, growing up playing ball.
No doubt. My dad loved baseball. I got 3 older brothers, and I grew up watching all of them play. We grew up in Miami, and it was endless amounts of practice and games, and I'd sit there and watch their practices, watch their games, try to replicate some of the stuff that they were doing before I was at an age where I can actually play organized baseball. But, man, I just grew up watching so much of it that I loved the competition of it at the house. My brothers were always talking about it and playing in the front yard. So it was something that I didn't know anything but baseball growing up.
So you had 3 older brothers?
3 older brothers,
No sisters?
Yeah. No
just
sisters,
the 4 of you?
Yes.
So I had an older brother, older sister, so same thing. Like we were at a tournament every weekend. Here in St. Louis, Lake of the Ozarks is a big thing. I never went to the Lake of the Ozarks until I was retired because I'm like, we were always at a tournament of some sort, following it. That younger kid has a little advantage of, being drugged all the practices, watching it and taking it in from there. So you transition into, you start to play, you start to develop, you go into high school. You're a pretty good player in high school?
Yeah. I went to high school in Dr. Phillips in Orlando, Florida. So we lived in Miami for a while. Hurricane Andrew hit in '92. We moved to the DR for about 3.5 years. And then
what was that like?
That was
tell me about the DR.
It was cool.
Here's another thing. Yeah. When I got into pro ball, I didn't know the first thing about DR. It's crazy to see, okay, these guys have been playing ball for a while, a lot different than I've been playing, but they can play.
Yes.
Like, what's that experience like?
It was, so I didn't play during the years that we were there, but my brothers did, and one of them, Ronnie, was getting pretty good at it, and he was getting to the point where he was going to have to make a decision, go to academy and stop kind of your route of education, and my parents didn't want to make that decision, so they decided to move back to the States and allow him to do both, play baseball and get an education. That was always important to them. So I never got to play there, but I got to see a decent amount of baseball, and it's a fun game. No, it's different baseball for sure, man. But it was cool to watch just the differences between here and there. But once we got to that point, we moved back so that he can do both, and we moved back to Orlando, and that's where I started high school over at Dr. Phillips.
So him playing baseball affected where you were going, because explain the academy a little bit for people that don't know how that works. All these teams have these academies in the DR, and kids sign super early, right? And go there, and that's all they do.
Yeah, and prior to that, some families decide that all they're going to do is play baseball. So I think it's getting better on the education side of it, but early on when we were there, it was you were doing one or the other. And for my parents, that just at the time wasn't an option, but it's that academy life is a grind.
Yeah, it's a tough decision from a family, right? From a parent's standpoint.
And my parents were doing well. They had their own restaurant, their own businesses in the DR, and to move here and start over again it was a transition. It was a tough one, but one that they wanted to make sure that we were able to have a better life than they had as far as education and pursuing our dreams. So it was a tough decision for them, but I'm glad they made it for sure.
Okay, so you get into high school.
Yeah.
You're a pretty good player.
Yeah, decent player. Loved the game, loved competition. I ended up getting drafted by Pittsburgh. I can't even remember what round, but super late. It wasn't even an option. And at the time, I was scheduled to go to a community college in Jacksonville, and I went and played in Joplin, Missouri at the USA Trials and had a good tournament. And University of Florida reached out and offered me about a 75% scholarship, and College of Charleston offered me a full ride. And my parents, we don't come from a ton of money, so it was a decision that was fairly easy for me. my older brother, went to the College of Charleston as well, so I had some familiarity with that as well. So we decided to go to CFC and start my college journey there.
Tough decision to leave the pro. I mean, I know you said it's not even, but I mean, it's still, there's a pull, right? I mean,
there's a pull where you feel good that someone's willing to give you a shot, right? And the goal was always like, man, I want to be a big leaguer. So to be noticed enough and then drafted, you think about it, like, all right, what would it be like if I said yes to this? But going to college and developing and actually giving myself a fair shot was the play.
Yeah, and that's a hard decision. I was a 25th round with the Cardinals out of high school.
Yeah.
And, the whole decision comes down to, what do I think is my best chance to make it?
No doubt.
Right? But every kid that gets drafted or doesn't thinks you're going to be the one that's there. There's only two that make it out of your class on average. Well, I'm one. Who's the other? Who's the other one going to be? You know what I mean? So that's a hard decision as an 18-year-old kid to make.
I think if I would have made that decision, they would have ate my lunch.
Yeah.
I mean,
You weren't ready.
No, I wasn't close to ready. Probably weighed 140 pounds, and I mean, it would have been a really tough journry.
Yeah. So you go to junior college.
No, I decided I took the full ride.
Go to the full ride. Yep,
I take the full ride of College of Charleston, and probably the best decision I ever made, life-wise, baseball-wise, around some really good people there that took me in, was able to start as a freshman, and it was a fun 3 years.
So then Cardinals come around 3 years later, because then the way it works in college, if you're junior college, back then, I know it changed for a little while. I think it's back that way now. You can get drafted every year out of junior college. If you go to a 3-year or 4-year university, you got to wait 3 years.
That's correct.
Before you're able to come out. So you commit to that college, you wait the 3 years, you develop, you get better, and then Cardinals come calling.
Yeah, and I attended a pre-draft workout in Jupiter, Florida, and it went okay. Nothing great. I did just okay, and I thought Atlanta was going to take me going into the draft, and I get a call from the Cardinals in the 6th round, and we made it happen and kind of agreed to a deal, and it was fun. I had the whole family there that day, and it was a cool experience.
So you sign, and then I'm assuming it was probably like me. Next day, you're on a plane, right?
It's a beautiful Batavia, New York.
Yeah. All right, so tell me about that. You show up. That's higher than where I was, and you spent time where I was. But we'll talk about that. But you end up in Batavia, which is high rookie at the time.
Yes.
And what's that like coming from college, going into the professional side in the New York Penn League and all the stadiums that come with it?
It was a transition. It really was, man, because you're playing at some pretty nice stadiums when you're in college, and then you get to rookie ball and you experience some cities and some different stadiums and host families and the whole deal. But it was still cool, and you're around for the first time. You're around players who are all equally as skilled as you, if not more skilled than you, and the competition that comes with that that's what drives me.
Yeah, I explain to people that it's the first time you have to think everybody that's there on that team is the best where they came from.
No doubt.
So the field you were on for probably your 3 years of college, you were the best player. In high school, you were the best player. And maybe in the conference, there might be somebody similar to you. But now everybody that you're going up against and teammates with, now you got to start to separate at that level. And that's where it starts to really shake out.
Yeah, I mean, you look left and right, and everybody's just as good as you, if not better. The conference I was in, the Southern Conference, there's a lot of good players. I think I was that class, the first one out, but I considered there to be better players than me in that conference. But you got to pro ball, and everybody's pretty good. So that transition was good as well, to mentally go through that grind of like, how do I stand out here and kind of sustain success at each level that they promote me to. But
you also got to play every day for the first time.
And that's the biggest difference. You put a aluminum bat in my hand, I did okay. You switch that thing to wood.
After 60 days straight with no off days,
that 190 batting average for 4 years caught up.
So you're in Batavia. You do that. Tell me about, just give me a brief on your playing career, kind of the levels you went to, how that went, and then we're going to get to that transition.
I'll try to remember how this all went. I think I went to Batavia. I spent a little bit of time there. They sent me to Quad Cities at the time, which was the low A team. The next year, my first spring training, I broke with the Palm Beach Club and was feeling pretty good about the track I was on. Didn't hit at all. They sent me back to Quad Cities. I spent a couple months there, and then I think I finished the year in Palm Beach again. And then every year after that, I was at Palm Beach. Saw a lot of guys come through.
That's a tough place to hit, though. I will say.
Yeah, it didn't matter where you put me. I couldn't hit.
Yeah.
But that is a tough place to hit. I spent, I think, 2 or 3 years there. And then in 2010, I think it was right around the All-Star break, they pulled me into the office. Writing was on the wall.
Yeah.
And they released me as a player. And as soon as he was done giving me the spiel of why I was no longer needed, I asked if there's an opportunity to transition to the staff side. And my heart was already there. Even the last couple months that I was playing, my mind was always thinking about what does this look like on the other side of it? Having an influence over players and coaching and even talking to different coaches. I remember that spring training, Tony came and spoke to us, the minor league players. And the whole time he's speaking, I'm sitting there going, man, I'm going to use that, and I'm going to use that. And, man, that's important. I find that important. And I was already thinking how to use his message on the other side of it and not as a player. So that's when mentally the transition was seamless for me because I knew I was ready to kind of.
So when you asked them, they immediately were like, yeah, we'll have a spot.
No, they said they would communicate it to the farm director and get back to me. A couple days went by, probably 3 or 4 days, and I got a call. And one of the coaches went down back in Batavia, and they said, hey, do you want to be kind of a fourth coach in the Penn League and finish off the year there? And I agreed to that. Off-season rolled around, and they offered me the hitting coach position in the GCL, which I took. And then in 2011, once Tony announced his retirement, there was some movement within our managers and different staff members, and a position opened up to manage. And at the time, I think I was 24, 25.
And you speak Spanish.
I do.
I mean, that's a big part, right, in the GCL. I mean, because a lot of the Dominican
that's where
guys are coming, and Venezuelan. And
all those guys are getting introduced to pro ball through that league.
And so it goes back to the Cardinals, the academy we're talking about. They send a lot of those guys over for a couple months.
Yeah, so you usually have a couple draft picks that are high school draft picks that are being introduced to pro ball there, and then a lot of guys from the academy are filtering through that GCL. So being bilingual,
huge,
super important. Yeah.
So what's that transition like? I mean, like you said, you're 23, 24. You're probably older than some of these kids, but you're probably pretty close to some of them too. You know, you get some of these junior college, or they stop in for mini camp or something. And what was that like? What was that transition like? Because it's hard to go from like full-time player and then just completely leave it, right? You still got it in you a little bit.
Yeah, and I've been asked several times, like, man, did you ever get an itch for playing again? And my answer is no, like never. Like once I was the staff, like on the other side, there's not one part of me ever said like, man, I wish I could grab a bat again. It just never happened. So the transition was pretty seamless. And I had, when I say some really good people around me, the Cardinals were super intentional about putting good people around me to make sure I was learning the game, learning how to handle a clubhouse, what communication looked like with other staff members, with players, managing up with the front office, with like just everything that that allows you to do this job well. And I kept my mouth shut and listened a lot. So that was a big
and the communication and at the younger levels. I mean, you might have their top draft picks, who they just gave a big signing bonus to. So there is that communication with, the high level brass here in St. Louis knows what's going on at those lower levels, is communicating with you guys. Farm directors, pitching coordinators are setting pitch limits and counts. I mean, so there's constant, you're not on an island down there. I mean, you have a lot of people that have eyes on and knows what's going on down there.
No, you're really not, especially once they offered me the position to manage in Johnson City.
Yeah.
You're getting your draft picks. We're playing against one right now, and Carson Kelly, he came in as a third baseman. He was 17 years old, and I remember every third day popping into his apartment, making sure he was okay and that he had what he needed. And, because that was, you're 17 and playing pro ball. That's a big jump.
Yeah.
So no, you usually have your top high school draft picks that you're looking after, and there's constant communication as to their workload and how you're managing that. And it's more so making sure that you don't miss with those guys than winning and losing ball games at that level, you know?
And developing your senior sign that they give $1,000 to in a plane ticket. I mean, you can't just focus on those superstars. You got to focus on everybody because you never know who's going to be the guy, right?
You have no idea who's going to be the guy, and I think our organization has done a good job of hitting on those guys that are past the 10th round, right? Like that. We develop well. We teach them how to play the game. We figure out what their strengths are and really double down on that. But you're truly, your main focus is strictly developing every single player on that roster, and you allow winning to take care of itself.
Yeah.
And not to say that you're not focused on winning, because you're developing winning players.
Yeah, you want to teach how to win too.
Exactly,
yeah.
but you're not gonna win at the expense of development.
Right, 100%.
Yeah.
So rookie ball, like, give me some mistakes you made. Like, when were you like, man, that was a boneheaded? Like, what are, as a manager, and you're sitting there and things are going, because there's obviously things when you're sitting in that seat that you never even knew happened, right, as a player. Like, I didn't see that, or I didn't think about that, or the guy over there has been managing a while and he's ahead of me. Like, what are some of those things that in rookie ball that you think of, that stood out to you?
I made plenty of mistakes, that's for sure. One of the ones that sticks out, I came out to the, a lineup card has both sides. You have your lineup and the opposing lineup. Well, when you're in the GCL, you save on paper, so you cut it in half, and you only print your lineup because you really don't care what the other side's doing. So I get to Johnson City, I'm managing for the first year, and Mark DeJohn, DJ's in town, to make sure I don't jack it up too bad, and saved on paper. So I cut that baby in half, and I only have my lineup. I post it in the dugout, and he comes to see what kind of moves the other side's making, and he only sees my side of the lineup. And he kind of gave me a glare. Didn't say anything during the game, but after the game, it was a fun time.
He's a quiet guy too.
He's not a quiet guy. No, and I'll tell you what, when I say good people put around me, when you talk about a teacher of the game,
there's a lot of people that would say that same thing.
It's I've never met somebody that teaches the game as well as he does, and 100% will not be in the seat if he didn't take the time to actually show me what this really looks like and how to be a good baseball guy, and what comes with being direct with players and honest with players. Because at the end of the day, is everybody going to love you? The answer is no.
Right.
No. But can they respect the fact that you're honest with them and they don't have to guess what you're thinking? Yeah, every player will respect that. And that comes from the way he handled me as a manager. I mean, I'll tell you, there was days where we win 4-2 once I was in called the Penn League again in State College, and I'm feeling good about it. I come to my desk and I'm like, all right, that was a good win. And he'd walk in, say, the heck were you doing in the fourth inning? In my head, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, that was stupid. Like, you can never do that. You played your infield in. Here's a situation. He's like, that's dumb. Don't ever do that again. So it was the direct communication where, is it at times you walk away from that going, I didn't feel real good? Yes, but you ain't making that mistake again.
Next fourth inning, you were dialed in.
No doubt.
Yeah. Well, and your right-hand man right now is Skip Schumacher as your bench coach.
Yes.
Played for DJ in the minor leagues, so he has that. So, your staff here that you came up with, some of the core players on your team came up with that. DJ retired not too long ago, but the Cardinals have that. Dave Ricketts still goes through. George Kissel still goes through. I mean, it's set 70 years ago, and people are just carrying that out. And now you're in charge of that. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So you move on through the minor leagues. I know you won a championship in the New York Penn League. And you get promoted pretty quickly, from a coaching standpoint. As a young guy, you get to the major league level, first base coach, then bench coach, and now the manager's job. What was that? What's the difference between, explain that transition from moving pretty quick through the minor leagues? I mean, I think you went from high A to the big leagues. Is that correct?
I did, yeah.
So okay, so now you show up to the big leagues. It's a lot different than the Florida State League. What's that like for the first time? And I assume your approach the same way. You just kind of kept your mouth shut, took it in, and filled in where you needed to go, right?
That's exactly right. I wanted to make sure I was extremely prepared. You can't. Experience is everything, okay? But I was trying to bring as much value to the room as possible while extracting as much value from the room as possible. So I'd sit in meetings and I was really intentional about asking certain questions and making sure I was listening. And if we were at a dinner, I was intentional about who I'm sitting next to, and I'm pounding you with questions and making sure that I'm extracting as much value from that conversation as possible so that I can apply it to what I was doing. Because it was, there's a big difference between Palm Beach. I know you just alluded to it, but between Palm Beach and the big leagues.
And you got to treat guys differently too,
No
right?
doubt about it.
Like your players. Like when you're managing at Palm Beach, you're kind of babysitting a little bit, right?
Yes.
In the big leagues, there's no babysitting. I mean, these guys are. The way it's always been explained. You have to be extremely approachable and willing to do whatever to make these guys go. The minor league level, you can kind of set the tone and do your own thing.
There's more collaboration at the big league level with players, where at the minor league level, you're dictating their days.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the biggest differences.
And if you're not received well by the big league players, you won't be here. Like it doesn't last long.
It's a super simple gig. It really is. But it doesn't mean doing things that make them happy. It's just bringing value to them. And I wanted to make sure that I was prepared enough, but in my communication, that they realized, man, this guy's bringing value to what I do on a daily basis. Like there's a level of respect there. So that was my biggest thing when I got up here is, man, how do I prepare in a way and communicate in a way where regardless of age, there's a certain level of respect because he's bringing value.
Yeah.
That was the biggest. That's where my mindset was when I transitioned from Palm Beach to the big leagues.
So you do that for a while, and we're gonna skip ahead here to kind of the end part. So your buddy Mike Shield, great friend, great mentor, right? All that goes down, and then you find out, I assume, that you're going to be a candidate to replace him. Like that's got to be a tough, a bittersweet. Like, man,
definitely,
this
tough.
is my guy. But this is a great opportunity, right? Like, I mean, you had to feel like you were in a tough spot there.
Yeah, it was a tough spot, and it was one, those close to me know, like I never had any goal of being a big league manager. Seems weird to people when I say like, yeah, never wanted to do it, was never on my radar, honestly. I knew at some point I'd have to make a decision to do it or not, but it was never something I was like, man, I can't wait to be a big league manager, and by this age I want to be doing this. So when all that went down, Schulte called me and we kind of talked through it, and it was, to your point, it was bittersweet. What was cool about the whole situation was his ability to say, hey, listen, they're going to come after, and if they do, you better not turn it down. So we had that conversation. We walked through that as to what that could look like, and he was very supportive of it. And we have a friendship that goes back. I mean, he was the one that drafted me. So, yeah, it was bittersweet. We were able to sit down, my wife and I, and just pray through, like, is this something we really want for us and our family and our two little girls? And finally decided that this was the right move because it was the right time.
So the interview, like, I'm curious to, like, what the heck does a big league manager do in an interview process? Like, you wear your uniform in there? Do you get signs? Like, what are they checking in on it? Or is it more like, hey, here's a situation, how would you handle it? Here's a player is upset or a staff member's upset, how do you handle it? Like, are they wanting to see your managerial side in terms of managing people? I mean, they know you, right? I mean, you came up in the system, but like, there's very few people that have been in that position and been interviewed. Like, that's got to be a unique interview.
Yeah, and it was unique because of what you just mentioned. They were familiar with my style of communication, with my in-game kind of how I think through the game. They weren't interviewing someone from another organization for the first time, right? So we were able to skip a lot of those norms that you would want to check in on and make sure they aligned with where the organization wanted to go. And it was more so, can you handle this clubhouse and the rich tradition of this organization and actually push it forward? So it was mainly communicating. And here's where I stand with that. You mentioned it a little earlier, and we can revisit it. It's like this organization has a incredible rich tradition that has given it success for a long time. And when we think about where the game's headed, it's really easy to say, yeah, there's all this innovative stuff over here. We got to run hard after that. And my take on it is it's really simple. Like, you anchor to what's giving you success and you innovate around that. But to just go chase innovation for the sake of innovation, like, a lot of teams do that and they search for years and get nowhere. Or they have a good year and then have no idea how to do it again. Like, we have a very good anchor here as to what gives us success. Like, you double down on that and you innovate around it, and being able to communicate what that looked like was part of the interview.
So I always say, give me the last year the Cardinals had a rebuilding year.
No.
You know, I mean,
we compete every year.
Every year. I mean, there's been down years. They haven't made the playoffs.
Well, that's going to happen. Yeah.
But there hasn't been a rebuild year, right?
No.
I mean, every year they're in the mix. And that, you look across Major League Baseball, there's very few teams that are able to do it. And then if you were to take those teams that can and you want to start looking at payrolls, there's some that buy it, you know what I mean? And then there's some that do it in a development way, in a business savvy way, which is a huge responsibility you have.
It's a huge responsibility.
Of all your predecessors and what they've done to put you in this position to go from there. An interesting thing, I think, is you have a clubhouse that's established, right? Yeah. So your players make your manager look good.
No doubt
right?
about it.
I mean, they're going to go out there, they're going to play for you. They're going to keep the continuity of that clubhouse together.
Yeah.
And the best thing you can do is allow them to do it, right? That's the one thing I learned from Tony. Like, Tony let the players run the clubhouse.
Yep.
He didn't come in and micromanage. He let them do it. You got to have the guys that can do that. Well, you have those guys, right? I mean, you have Adam and Yachty. There's got to be a fine line, though, of that you're the final say, right? So you got to give them their leeway and let them do their thing and let them lead. They're older than you. You know, they got bigger names than you, but ultimately, if you don't want that to happen, like, you have to step in. Like, is that just a communication side? Like, how does that work with you guys?
It all stems back to communication and your ability to do it well. This all fails if you lack the ability to communicate with your veteran group. So to your point, we got together during spring training, and it was a simple conversation as to, with our pitching group, with our veteran position players, and then with the entire group, what do we want our identity to be? What do we want to be known for? When people come into Busch Stadium, what do we want them to experience? How do you want it to be described? And allow them, so all I'm doing as the manager is creating the framework for them to use their own words to define what this is going to look like. And once they define it, now it gives me the ability to hold them accountable to that. All right, we said we were going to be known for this, this, and this. Now, those are your words. I'm holding you accountable to those three things. When it doesn't look this way, it's my job to bring us back to it. So I think whenever you create the framework that way, you're giving them ownership over what this looks like, but you're holding them accountable to their own words. And that's one thing we've done well here.
So your first day here, give me your thoughts on that.
I loved it. I mean, opening day here, the way I've described it, like, you can't match it. You really can't. My favorite part about it, and the part I look forward to every time, is getting dropped off at home plate, because you have all the Red Jackets there, and it's really cool because in my head, the way I always thought of it is that every time you shake one of those hands, you are agreeing to moving this thing forward. And that's the part.
In a totally different way this year for you than any other year.
No doubt about it.
Because you've shook their hands before as a staff member, but now you're the head guy.
Yeah,
it's a different handshake.
No, you're absolutely right. But that was the part that was cool. Was like, you're shaking all these hands that have had crazy success and that have allowed, like, people go nuts here when they hear those names for a reason. Like, they've given this organization a lot of different wins on and off the field. So you're shaking that hand and basically saying, like, I'll carry that on. I don't take that lightly at all. Yeah.
So first win, I mean, put it past you, move on to the next day, or soak it in?
I wish I can say I soaked it in. It was cool, but I moved on to the next one pretty quick. Yeah. And I'm sure at some point I'll sit back and be like, man, you know what? This part of the season was great. This part was great. It was fun to be able to do this. This sucked, and go through that list. But I've yet to take in the time to go, you know what, this is pretty neat. Yeah.
I when I was playing here, everybody's like, are you realizing, growing up here? And I'm like, man, my head is down right now. Like, I'll celebrate this when I'm done. And it's hard. Like, I hear Wayno talk about it now and Albert talk about it now when they get interviewed about, like, I'm having more fun. It's okay if I don't stick to my absolute routine. Like, if I branch out and go see something in these cities, because we get in such a routine.
You really do.
But you feel like you have to, because you owe it to your teammates, you owe it to the city, you owe it to the management to put out the best product. But it's a grind. It's a total grind.
It is. But the last thing you want is to have your head up and going, man, this is pretty neat. This is pretty neat. And then you
get caught
the
off
season
guard.
ends and you go, well, that wasn't very good. So I'd rather have my head down and we'll enjoy it a little later.
Yeah. You getting recognized around St. Louis?
I haven't left my house, so
Okay.
not yet. Yeah, anytime I've spent it with the girls at the house and try to catch up there. So once we get going a little bit more, I'll probably get out a little bit.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us here on
No doubt.
the first studio version of the Chatters Box. And I've known you for a while. Knew you, early on in your coaching days, and we overlapped in your playing days as well. And
Yeah.
It's been cool to see, man.
No,
I've been cheering for you, and it's been cool to see you handle everything and take it. And like you said, it's a big responsibility. You're stewarding a massive thing here, but I think you're a good guy to do it. I think you're on the right track. You got good people around you, and I think the organization's in good hands. So really appreciate your time. I know you're busy. Thanks for taking time to do this, and wish you nothing but luck.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Kyle.